Absolutely.
Speaking of kind of going all in, you might have to do that if you lost Stefon Diggs this week. You might have to go get a receiver because he's been a top 10 receiver on the year. And unfortunately, we don't have confirmed news, but it looks like torn ACL. We're probably going to get news here very quickly that it is a torn ACL. And I
I
think
saw
that's,
ACL or even meniscus, which would be bad too, because that's 4 or it could be season long. So
yeah, either way, we're
not
going to be
good.
without Stefon Diggs in our lineups for a while. This Texans team now needs a receiver in a hurry. Nico Collins is expected to be back in week 10. But before that, Tyler, we got to find somebody. And we saw
Hmm.
three receivers hit the field a little bit more than usual: Xavier Hutchinson, Robert Woods, and John Mechie. So, this is a tough one because I don't really think there's a rip and replace for Stephon Diggs, let alone
Hmm.
Nico Collins, just in this offense in general. Who are you looking at as far as the pickup, right? Obviously, I think Xavier Hutchinson's the biggest name on there. Is there anybody else you think could have fantasy value here, or is he the guy?
No, I would say him, and the reason why too is you're gonna have Nico Collins. It looks like by all reports he's gonna be ready to go right when he's eligible to come back. I think a guy like Dalton Schultz could get a little bit of a bump, but I think he's already rostered in a bunch of leagues as well. So if I had to pick somebody, it would be Xavier Hutchinson. And I kind of said this, and I think it's true as well. Like this is a make it break it kind of point for Tank Dell. And I was a big, Tank Dell believer because he has all the opportunity in the world now. Like there's no excuses going forward. And I guess the one thing is, had that broken leg last year, which sometimes we see these players aren't quite right the following season. So maybe it's still kind of lingering effects of that. But now we're late into the season. You're gonna have Nico Collins coming back. I think this might be a good opportunity to potentially buy Tank Dell, even though you're necessarily buying high. But it's an opportunity where we'll see what happens. He could end up being I see a lot of comparisons to like Elijah Moore, where we thought Elijah Moore, his rookie season was really good. Hey, good second season. And it wasn't. It was really disappointing. So we're in a situation there with Tank Dell. But I would say Xavier Hutchinson. The only thing, though, is you're basically kind of getting him for a week because
One
then you
week,
have Nico
yeah.
Collins. So I I really want to put a claim for any of these guys unless I'm like in a deep, deep league and absolutely desperate.
Well, it's like we saw Xavier Hutchinson in a larger role last time, and it didn't
Yeah, it
amount to
didn't.
much.
Yeah.
And it just feels like this offense is probably going to dink and dunk their way, use Joe
And
Mixon.
Joe Mixon's gonna be
Like he's the biggest beneficiary out of all this. And I
yeah.
think when it comes to CJ Stroud, it's like we got to kind of just temper our expectations with him, at least for this week. Tough matchup against the Jets, short week. They're probably going to lean on the run game a little bit more. Even Damian Pierce will probably see a little bit more action out of the backfield this week. So I think when it comes to like, do you need to pick up Xavier Hutchinson or do you need to pick up John Mechie or Robert Woods or elevate up, Dalton Schultz? It's like, I think we just got to know this passing game is probably going to be limited going into
Yeah.
Thursday night and on a short week. They're obviously,
Yeah.
we don't know the final news on Diggs. I'm just assuming he's not going to be out there on Thursday. But if I think the sneaky value here, if I was looking like player prop wise or like trying to find any value, I think the sneaky value might be John Mechie, somebody that could play out the slot as well. But like, is kind of proving himself. I think they had an opportunity to cut him earlier this year. They didn't. And this is
Mhm.
a former, higher draft capital pick. They cut Noah Brown instead. So I think John Mechie may get some opportunity here on a short week, but that's a coin flip, a pure coin flip.
Yeah.
And I think mostly that'd be on the player prop side instead of like in your roster fantasy
Yeah.
wise.
Absolutely.
So you talked about you think Nico Collins like comes back. The one thing I want to talk about with Nico is he's on the verge of coming back. And I
Mhm.
know he left the game as like the number one or two receiver. Right? It was between him and Chris Godwin
Yeah.
or Malik Neighbors at the time. I can't remember, but he was the number one top running wide receiver when he left. I I think he can still reproduce that, but I think we were getting like really good production out of him and hadn't seen the floor games out of Nico Collins yet. I think he's an elite receiver. I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
But do you think he's like a top three guy moving forward? Like, how would you value Nico Collins? Because there's probably going to be some Nico Collins trades here over the next couple weeks. And you either got to view him as like a top three asset, what receiver wise, or maybe you're trying to buy low from the person who thinks he's just a top 10 guy.
I would view him as top 5 asset is how I would look at him in terms of wide receivers. And I said this, if I could buy him as like a a back end wide receiver one, like a wide receiver 10 kind of guy, absolutely I would do that. And the reason being is it's not like we just had that short sample size of Nico Collins being great. Like last season, he was fantastic. I mean, on paper, looking at the underlying efficiency metrics and everything, one of the best wide receivers in football, and then just picked up right where he left off last year and was one of the best wide receivers in football. And that's competing with, Tank Dell and Stefon Diggs. He was still one of the best wide receivers in football. And we've seen this passing offense just has not been right. I mean, you could say maybe for the whole season, but especially after Nico Collins went down, it just has not been right. So they're really missing him. I think he's going to maybe not be the wide receiver one in fantasy football the rest of the way out, but I definitely think that he can be a top 5 guy easily, you know, based off of what we've seen out of him. And if I can buy him as wide receiver 10, absolutely I would.
I think I would just bunch him in like that cat. There's that Justin Jefferson, Jamar
Yeah, I think
Chase,
he's right there with
St.
those guys.
Brown, Lamb,
Well,
Tyreek
that's the
Hill,
problem.
AJ
Like,
Brown.
who's wide receiver 1 right now? I don't
I
know.
think it's like a big ass
Yeah,
fucking
big
just
like a
glob of
bunch
wide
of
receivers is
yeah.
wide receiver one. Man.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. Like that's top 5, right?
Yeah.
So if I can view him, if anybody views him less than that, absolutely I would buy.
There's like 7 to 10 like could be wide receiver 1 type
Yeah,
players.
I don't know who do you think, if you had to take your guess, who finishes wide receiver 1 this year? It's really up in the air. I think it's really, really
I think
close.
Jettas gets hot. He's already had his
I think
bye. I
Chase
think Jettas
does.
gets hot. I know you think Chase.
It's gonna be interesting to see what happens for sure.
Yeah,
Because
that
even
wide receiver.
CD tore it up this past week. Looked
CD's
great.
back, and we know what he did
Looked
after the
great.
bye last week.
Yeah,
I just don't know that it's Nico Collins. Like that's the thing is like maybe he gets additional opportunity now.
I just think we don't say
out.
that because we don't think of him in the same vein as CD, Jamar Chase, like that
He
level.
ain't earned it yet. He hasn't.
Yeah,
He hasn't been that.
But if
yet.
he does, it's like, all right, I saw it coming, but I didn't want to admit it to it. It's like one of those things where it's like, I know it can happen, but I'm not ready to fully admit that it can happen because he's just.
I'm just not trading. If I'm like going into the person that has Nico Collins is like, yo, give me Justin Jefferson. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's fine.
They say, give me Jamar Chase, St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I think he's right. I might do it for like Tyreek. That's one
With
that I'm
potentially.
Too?
I don't know. That's
well, because we talked about it, their playoff schedule is kind of rough, and we know what this team does down the stretch. They kind of fall off, and yeah, so he's interesting.
Well, speaking of fall off, the Jacksonville Jaguars fell off this year.
Wait, one more thing. We didn't talk about this money line, this egregious the spread right now for this Thursday night game.
Oh, we do got to talk about it. So right now,
the Jets are currently 1.5 point favorites against the Houston Texans, which I understand. Like people, and I was talking to this with my friend group. They're like, well, the Texans, they're down, already Nico Collins. Now they have Stefon Diggs. And I'm like, guys, this team just lost to Kayshon Boutte and fucking Demario Douglas last week. Like, are we really going to sit here and say, they don't have Nico Collins? Like, are you kidding me? They're a bad football team. Bad football teams lose. They found a way to lose last week. They should have won that game. Last drive, Jacoby Brissett drove down the field. He had to score a touchdown, and he scores a touchdown. Like, this is what bad football teams do. This is what the Steelers did last night, right? The Giants could have went down there, scored a touchdown, go for 2, tie up the game. But what happens? They throw an interception because that's just what bad football teams do. They lose games. And right now, the New York Jets are a bad football team. I can't believe that a 2-6 team is the favorite over a 6-2 team. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I would absolutely be betting on that.
How they gonna move the ball? How the Texans gonna move the ball?
How are they gonna Joe Mixon? The one thing that the Jets have not been able to do this year is stop the run. And you have one of the best running teams coming in football right now. This team went into Foxborough and beat the shit out of the Patriots just a couple weeks ago. And the Jets just went into Foxborough and lost. And the other side of it too, like Aaron Rodgers, he can't move. You have one of the best pass rushing units in football, one of the better defenses in football in the Houston Texans, a very good defensive mind, DeMeco Ryans. I just think a
And
lot
they're
of
good
people
at
are putting
stopping the
so much
run too.
faith.
They're gonna make the Jets have to throw.
Yes,
It could get ugly.
I just don't understand it. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that they're favorites. I kind of
Well,
understand, but it's just
Houston was favored in this game until like all the Stefon Diggs
like
stuff I
Stefon
think
Diggs,
came out.
yeah.
Yeah, I think once they confirmed it was once they knew it was like torn ACL, I think this line swung. But we'll see how it goes, man. We'll see because the Jets they are in this must-win scenario. They got to win like
They've been
10
in must
straight
win
just to make
for
the playoffs.
weeks, and they can't win.
They can't.
I don't. They're bad. It's crazy.
Yeah.